To see. Well, good evening, everybody, and good to see we've got a full turnout tonight. Right, I'll start off with the fire evacuation, etc. procedures. Okay. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear of this room. go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. Members, please note that this meeting is being webcast live on the internet. And please switch your phones to silent or even vibrate. Thank you. Okay, we have no apologies because we're all here. I don't believe there are any urgent matters. Any declarations of interest? No. So it's minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of September. Are members happy that that's a true fair reflection of that which occurred?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, splendid. So that takes us on to item 5, which is the Ernst & Young audit progress update. You will recall from the last meeting that we expected on this agenda to have a few more, shall we say, items, etc. But in terms of this audit, we have been informed that it can't be completed until our next meeting at the end of January. And just to put it in perspective, generally the audits in the public sector, the local authorities and the police, in some cases are 3 years behind schedule. So being a couple of months behind schedule, I suppose you could say is defendable in that respect. Okay, so are you doing the update? Or have we got those?
No, EY aren't coming. Are we just? It's just there for information.
It's just there for
Yes.
It's just there for information. We aren't
There's just a couple of items that we've received in terms of the update on value for money. Does anyone want to make any comments on what we've received, bearing in mind? Councillor Basham.
Thank you, Chair. I read through the Ernst & Young report, and I obviously read it in the context that a lot of public sector audits are delayed and have been delayed. However, we seem to have been keeping ourselves ahead of that, which was great. When you read the 6-7 page report, which really doesn't say much, what it does say in there in a couple of nuggets is that I think the pensions liability bit is finished, or one of the bits is finished. 3 or 4 of the other items, it says they're waiting on evidence from the council. So while I take your point that audits across the country are delayed in the public sector and there's pressure on audit firms, this report, is that Ernst & Young pointing the finger at us not being adequately resourced to deliver it on time, or is it really an Ernst & Young problem?
So I think it's just worth noting that due to the resources of the EY, our auditors, they did actually start 2 months later than anticipated. As a council, we have responded to all the audit queries that have been raised on a regular and timely fashion. To be fair, information that we've provided, there are no resources currently in EY, or there haven't been, to actually then look through those queries and respond to that evidence. So where we are at the moment is we're continuing to work with EY and obviously hoping to understand what resources they have available. And we have been pushing to them to obviously review our evidence as soon as possible. But we are responding in a very timely fashion. But actually we can only respond to the queries that they actually raise with us when they're raising them with us. So I think, as the Chair has already said, I think we're still quite lucky that we're trying to get a formal resolution to this in early January. And obviously the committee will then see the outcomes of that at the end of January. But no, this is not as a result of council officers not responding on time.
Yeah, Councillor Basham.
Thank you, Chair. I just think it's worth pointing out to Ernst & Young that they should perhaps be a little more candid in their report then. I don't know if you agree. Adam's nodding.
I think the reality is that they are not progressed enough to have actually put that much detail in their report at this time.
Well, thank you. on to item 6 is the summary that we get of the investment income and property aged dead. This is just the summary of other reports that we receive, which in the totality looks quite positive.
Yeah, it's just obviously provided for information for noting only. And this information is obviously reported within the monitoring reports as we go forward. But as you would expect, and as reflected in the Treasury Management Strategy later on the agenda, perversely, the increase in interest rates are very beneficial to the council as a net investor.
Councillor Basham? Oh, sorry. Right, Councillor Putty.
Chairman, just a small question about the money down investment. Is the investment singular for BDBC or is it shared with HCC?
So this particular investment is relating to the land drawdown, which is currently still under negotiation, and Hampshire County Council have a similar level of planned investment in infrastructure works with the overall development, which obviously is on hold at the moment until we've actually drawn the land down.
Councillor James.
Just one of my lack of knowledge here. We always seem to have an original budget, then latest budget, then obviously forecast. I totally get. I'm just a little bit puzzled that if you have a budget and then you have a latest budget and you are continually updating your budget, there's a very good chance you're going to hit the budget every time and look really good. So just trying to understand, and it probably should be caveated, why we had an original budget and it changed, because it seems to not be a budget anymore.
So obviously we don't revise the budget in year, but we do have budget refinements which are detailed in the budget monitoring each quarter. So I can't tell you off the top of my head, unless Adam can, what the change in the 0.07, the 70,000 is. But there's obviously been a environment related to an aspect of the scheme during the year. But obviously we report those as part of the budget monitoring. But usually, generally, they are releases from reserves that have been approved by Cabinet or Council.
Councillor Basham.
Thank you, Chair. My question is very similar to Councillor Putty's. Just on many down investment, I mean, the ones above make sense to me. Commercial rents, property investment strategy, treasury management, all of these throw off a yield. I'm just struggling to understand how, what a land drawdown, how that throws off a yield. And there was supposed to be 670,000 a year. Is that right? Have I read that right?
So it's related to the fact that once the land drawdown has happened, both the Borough Council and the County Council will be providing forward infrastructure funding for the development. So actually the actual investment hasn't been drawn down yet, so therefore we're not getting a return.
Still confused, because we are forecasting to get a return of £320,000.
So the money down is made up
accountant?
of loan notes from previous investments, but the bulk of that is related to the new drawdown that they will take on place for infrastructure funding once we've had the land drawdown.
So is it real money or is it an accounting adjustment?
No, it's real money. It's a real payment of interest and repayments, but they haven't actually taken the sum of money yet. They haven't drawn it down from our accounts. So as part of the budget updates that we take in February, we will move the capital spend into next financial year because actually we haven't actually spent the money. We haven't actually given the actual loan.
So this is a movement between our capital and our revenue. It's an accounting adjustment. It's not income we're generating.
No. So when we have a capital investment sum within the capital programme, which will generate a revenue interest figure. We're not getting the revenue interest figure at the current time because we haven't made the capital investment.
Thank you.
Right, on to item 7, the Treasury Management Mid-Year Report for 2022-23. Adam.
Thank you, Chair. So this report shows the activity within the Council's Treasury Management function from the 1st of April to the 30th of September this year. And the committee are asked to note the paper. Key points to note are that budgeted income from Treasury Management was 1.88 million and with a forecast budgeted rate of return of 1.61. Clearly, movements in interest rates this year have led to a greater than expected return, and we're now forecasting a return of 3.12 million, which is 1.24 million higher than budgeted. Investment balances at 30th of September were 145 million at cost. And Section 9 sets out some changes since the end of September that are relevant just to bring to the committee's attention. So firstly, in October this year, we added a AAA rated climate awareness bond issued by the European Investment Bank to our long-term investments with a yield of 3.67%. And this bond is issued solely to fund projects that address climate change, such as renewable energy, energy efficiency, and research and development of low carbon technologies. And that's in place until 2024. And also the Bank of England base rate has increased again in November to 3% from 2.25%, which was the position at the end of September. That was all I was going to kind of bring to your attention, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Tostain.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wondered, because obviously this is good news that it's obviously been so positive, but obviously with high inflation, what's the impact on this? Or I'm sure there must be an impact, especially with the liquid assets, because they're being used for revenue spend and things.
So obviously there is an impact on the asset values, particularly of the bonds, as I think we highlighted in the last paper, that there's an inverse relationship between interest rates and yields on bonds, and so there is a unrealised capital depreciation value of those assets at the moment.
So I may just add to that. I think just picking up your point is that most of the inflation element is going to affect our capital spend rather than our revenue spend, and that's why you don't necessarily see it reflected in here.
Councillor Tom.
Referring to the appendix.
Yeah, so that it's in the appendix to the report, but that will be short-term deposits with the Debt Management Office of HM Treasury, as well as bank deposits and other short-term money market funds as well.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that this is the results to end of September, but you do comment on some of the turmoil that's occurred in the last 2 months, which will obviously impact things going forward. I note your prediction that interest rates will go to 5%, which is a daunting prospect. So I think I saw a hand. Councillor Katecha.
Sorry if I'm looking at the wrong side of this. Are we going to be looking at investments for our liquid assets, basically, which are inflation-proof, or as much as possible to be inflation-proof? So we've got a lot of liquid assets. Are we going to look at a situation where we put some of that liquid assets into investments where it's inflation-proof to protect ourselves, or as much as it can be inflation-proof?
So the reason why we keep short-term assets more liquid is because they're there to fund the capital programme. So we can't invest them for longer periods in different asset classes. And we also hold between 30 and 40 million pounds effectively cash at very short notice to pay for just the normal kind of day-to-day running of the authority.
Councillor James.
Yeah, I was just looking through the Treasury Management Investment Holdings, and some of these I think were the ones you just covered in terms of they expired end of October. There's quite a lot going, a couple in December, and quite a few in January next year. So when we talk about holding things for the long term, is it just like these are normally 5-10 years and we just happen to be at an expiry point for all of these? Because I think, I'm trying to think back 10 years ago, what was going on, but we'd come out of a financial crash, interest rates had fallen through the floor and we were panicking, and now they're going up and we're not panicking in this committee, we are not, but that's, so, because it just seems like they look all very short term, but I guess those happy days, because they're quite rubbish, at 0.45%, and next year you're going to give us councillors a lot more money to spend because our returns are going to be so much higher.
So I think it is just coincidental they happen to be coming to an end over the next few months, and we will obviously look at where best to place those going forward. Quite often we replace our treasury bills with treasury bills, but obviously we'll look at the best option for those, so we have that kind of mix of very short term, medium term and longer term, so we will look at the best options for the medium term holdings.
Councillor Basham.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a few questions, if I may. Paragraph 7.1, where we talk about our Arling Close managed funds, and they are benchmarked against Arling Close's client pool, if you like. And then 7.7, sorry, there's roughly £55 million worth of investments in Arling Close, if I'm right. I think. Adam's frowning, I might have got that wrong. 35 million in our internally managed funds out of the 80. And our internally managed funds are managed with a different benchmark, is that correct? Paragraph 7.7 talks about chart 4 benchmarking those. So we've got kind of two different benchmarks for two different pools of money. Have I understood that right? Are there any ambitions to create a single benchmark for our money, and if not, why not?
Firstly, Arling Close are our treasury management advisors. We don't hold investments with them. They provide us investment advice, and they provide us the benchmark, obviously, against other local authorities, so we can see our performance. And we split them because obviously we have some internally managed where officers in my team will look to invest in line with the treasury management strategy and achieve a return in line with that. So we look at kind of how we're performing against other internally managed things. The others are with external fund holders, and there's a range of those that's set out in the appendix to the paper.
So I thank you. So I think I've understood correctly so far. If I may, the chart on page 28, chart 4. So that's the one that shows our non-Arling Close benchmarked funds, correct? Yeah. So I was trying to work out how we performed. And I came to the conclusion to say, well done. It looks like we've done rather well, I think, considering how low down the risk curve we are. And we seem to have delivered a pretty good return at 1.6% over whatever period that's measured. I guess it's annually. So thank you. Well done to the in-house team, I think. It does still leave me just a little bit thoughtful about how we as a committee are able to assess the performance of that in-house team. Perhaps, I mean, I may have got that wrong. So how we can assess it objectively, because there is quite a lot of money that's under the team's control, right? And it's the job of this committee to assess controls and not necessarily performance, but controls and risk around that money. So I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, or if you think what we're doing at the moment is adequate. I don't know what other committee members think about how they understand this information as it's presented and how that works for them.
So I picked that up So to be very clear, the internal team manages all of this money. So Iron Close don't manage any money on our behalf. Obviously, they advise us on the best external funds in terms of where we might, based on our strategy that council obviously approves, they advise us in line with that, or anything new that comes up that we want to have a look at. It's an internal officer decision, either myself or Adam, that sign off the investments as per the delegations given to me as 151 officer by council. So everything that we invest is in line with the strategy, and what this paper is doing is explaining to you why the investments we've made are in line with the strategy, and that is the remit of the audit committee, is to make sure that I'm not investing money outside of the strategy that the council has approved. So in terms of this, the assessment that you're doing is, are we managing it in line with the strategy, which what the evidence we're trying to provide to you is that we are. And then in terms of these benchmarking, we were asked previously to separate these two out, which is what we've now done. And in terms of the external funds, Arlene Close will come back to committee in January and give you their update in terms of how those funds are performing more generally. But obviously all of those funds are in line with the council policy. And what I would expect you to be challenging us on in terms of that, perhaps chart 5, is how can we move the blue dot up and along, which has been the conversation that we had when we set the strategy for this current year, which allowed us to bring in some more risk adverse investments, because the actual treasury management strategy was very, very risk averse. So we have brought in some new investment types that will allow us to try and move ourselves along that curve. So obviously then it's about explaining to you what we're trying to do that. And one of those things, obviously, as we've noted, we had the opportunity to also do that and invest in a sort of climate change or sustainable bond, which obviously when that comes into the chart will start to move us along that line. But the other thing as well is that we identified 2 long-term external funds that have not been performing well. And the plan was in this financial year to dispose of those particular investments, and that would have actually provided the alternative funding for the many down activity that obviously hasn't happened yet. So, but also because of the climate that we find ourselves in, now would not be the best time for us to actually dispose of those particular investments, because actually the returns we're getting on them are actually pretty good, and the capital value has dropped. So we assess it at all times. So from the committee's point of view, this report is meant to be telling you what we've been doing as an internal team in line with the strategy. So if there was something clearly obvious in here that's out of sync with the strategy, that's what I would expect you as the committee to be challenging us on.
Yeah, when we go on to the next item on the agenda, it's quite good if you read the SIPS report on what is the role of the committee. It's quite subtle in parts. But yeah, Councillor Tusting.
Thank you. Yes, just following on from that. So I'd written down, obviously, in chart 4, we are close to where we aim to be, which is excellent. But what I'd like to know, actually, is, and obviously in chart 5, as Sue just pointed out, that's one that says room for improvement. But what I'd like to know is, have we actually moved that dot along at all this year from when we started talking about this a year ago, whenever it was?
So the plan had, in terms of been moving that along, was to disinvest in the two of the funds that are the least well performing. But obviously, because the current climate, we would actually end up having to pay quite a substantial sum of money to come out of those investments. So now is not the time for us to come out of those investments, and plus they're starting to get a better return because of the interest rate increases. So we have an exit strategy for those investments, but now is not, my assessment is now is not the right time to do it, because actually if you balance off a further investment that gives us a higher return, it won't offset the cost of us actually coming out of those investments. So we have a plan for those. And then obviously we're just looking at, as some of our longer term investments mature, we will look at other options to move that along.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we've probably done that one. We can move on to item 8.
Do you want to just do the recommendations to note?
Sorry, yes. What on item 8?
Just confirm to Ellie that the recommendations are noted on action 7.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Just need to confirm that Committee notes.
Yes, yes, the committee notes the report, yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah, the recruitment of an independent member of the Audit and Accounts Committee, we mentioned this at the last meeting. It's quite clear, I attended the Southern Region Chairman of Audit and Accounts Committees, a sort of 6-monthly meeting. And CIPFA did a presentation which made it quite clear that this was going to be a mandatory thing in their system, and it was going to be incorporated by the Ministry for levelling up as a mandatory requirement for councils in the future. So this is basically reflecting what we're going to have to do, although we're now, it would seem, just doing it slightly ahead. So it is recommended on page 35, there are 4 items which the committee is asked to consider and recommend. As I mentioned, some of the CIPFA report is actually very interesting on the role of committees and how they work in local authorities and indeed the police. Do you members have any comments, or can we just adopt these? Councillor Tustain.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I did notice on page 43 that it does actually mention having at least 2 co-opted independents. So we seem to have opted to just have the one. Is there a rationale behind that?
Yeah, so in the CIPFA guidance, it does, in the proposals from the government review as part of kind of wider local audit and accounts, they suggest a minimum mandatory of 1. So that was the reason for it.
Councillor James.
It's not something I'm going to oppose. The more I think about this, I think it came up a sort of year ago. We have officers that are controlled by law, Section 151 officer, you know, if you spoil it all, you get, I don't know, exterminated or something. Probably didn't mention that in your contract, but it is in there, I've seen it. So there's that kind of going on, and then you're scrutinised by us as an Audit and Accounts Committee, making sure we stay within this Treasury Management Strategy, which we set as a council. Then we have Ernst & Young come through and go through all of it. We have our own internal auditor, who's normally around somewhere, hidden over there in the corner, quietly looking at a spreadsheet. So there's quite a lot of audit going on, and now we can have an independent member to this committee to support us and make sure that we're doing our job properly. I'm just wondering if we need a scrutiny committee to look at what the audit committee do, so the audit committee look at what you do and what your internal auditors do, and examine what the, because it's just getting, you know, it's cheap, so it's fine, but I just think sometimes you've got to stop.
Councillor Basham.
Yeah, joking aside though, Councillor James makes a good point, and it's, you know, I think I'd be right in saying that this would be the first and the only committee which would have, apart from standards actually, which would have an independent lay member. So it'd be the second committee to have an independent lay member. And it just made me wonder, this is a, from the job description, this is a professional person who is skilled in larger organisations and financial management of larger organisations, in particular audit skills. And it's meant to basically backfill a gap that we are perceived to have, or committees across the country are perceived to have in their skill sets. And it just made me think what other committees in this council would benefit from having a lay person. And it made me think about if we did have 2 lay people, and right now I'm thinking 0 or 2. I think 1 is a compromise. But if we were to have 2 people, 2 lay people on this committee, then 1 would fit the job description that I guess Adam's written, that's in here. The other one that I thought would be particularly useful to me, and I don't know about others, would be someone who can help us with the property portfolio and the property assessment. It makes up a significant part of the assets of this council. It creates a significant part of our revenue. There's a fair amount of jargon in the next report to come, which I will apply myself and learn to understand more in detail. But I wonder whether if we were to have 2, and recommend that we have 2 lay people added to this committee, we have one with a financial and auditing and reporting bias, and one with a property bias who can help us with the other functions of this committee.
That's not an officer question.
No, I don't think we as a committee can take that at this point. If you wanted to follow that through, it would probably have to go to Cabinet as a policy. I think my personal view when this came up, actually I think 2 years ago, was I wasn't very happy with it because, especially if you have two, it might make members reticent to contribute, and you end up with the experts doing the committee, not the democratically elected members. The other committees are policy committees, so you certainly wouldn't want external members on a policy committee. So it's quite a delicate subject, but the government seems to think we would benefit. So this is a first toe in the water to see how it goes. Councillor Jones.
I absolutely agree, Chair, and we haven't found one yet. And if you look at the job spec we're looking for, someone who's got all that experience and knowledge, who's obviously had a very successful career, possibly still in a successful career in this business, and someone who also, along with that successful career, considerable earned income, wealth, generous pension scheme, stops and thinks to him or herself, do you know what I really want to do is 6 times a year on a Monday evening go to Basingstoke and sit in the chamber looking at more bloody numbers after a whole career of it. I think we just, let's look for one, because I'm not entirely sure we're going to get the flood, perhaps that Michael Gove thought we were going to get when he opened, or whoever it was who decided on this thing. I think we should just stick with one for now, because, yeah.
Do you not think the remuneration we're offering would be incredibly attractive?
I think the parking thing we're going to offer them probably is going to be worth more.
Well, on the basis that we're going to be forced into this, by government or whatever, do you as members agree that we should follow through those 4 recommendations? Agree. Councillor Basham.
Sorry, I'm not in agreement, Chair. I think that before I can agree to that, I think we need to understand, I think we need to have a position on why we are deviating from SIPFA's position statement with regards to audit committees in local authorities. It is the job of this committee to ensure proper governance, and if the accounting regulator that regulates this council is making a position statement, it's not even it's an accounting standard. Anyway, it's a positioning statement, and if we're going to deviate from that, I think we need to have a stated position as to why we are deviating from it.
Councillor Cubitt.
I would completely concur with Councillor Basham. It's kind of slightly perverse to put in the document that SIPFA are recommending that we have at least 2 co-opted, and then we go and decide to go a completely alternative route.
So understanding the position of the committee, obviously, as Adam has already explained, we're going down the route of the mandatory, what would be mandatory, and that's why 1 is offered at the moment. If the committee was so minded that we should have 2, if we were successful in our recruitment campaign, it may well be possible for us to recruit 2.
Councillor Basham.
Hence, thank you. Hence my point about perhaps a slightly different job description for the second one, because I really don't think we'd benefit from having 2 technical excellence and young bods, or wherever they're from, sitting in here. We'd certainly benefit from 1, but I think that if we were to look at a slightly different skill set, I mean, we pay JLL as advisors, we pay other property advisors, we pay Ernst & Young as our advisors, but we don't, if we're going to strengthen that part of the committee on the governance and financial reporting side, then we should equally balance it by strengthening the other key aspects that this committee considers, which I think, I've already said how big our property portfolio is and how large our income generated from it is. And I don't know if any of my fellow councillors here have got Cushman and Wakefield type experience. I don't think they have.
Councillor Isaac.
Well, just to reassure you, Councillor Basham, yes, I do. And I'm a chartered surveyor, or retired now, I suppose, but I've had over 30 years' experience with commercial property.
Thank you, John, Councillor Isaac, but you're not on this committee. That's the last time I checked.
Councillor James.
Councillor Isaac, I mean, he's got all that experience. He's unfortunately a Conservative as well, which obviously counts against him. But he has that experience, which means we're very blessed in this council that there is that additional oversight that Councillor Isaac, yes, he's a politician, but do you know what? I don't think the officer is going to get away with a lot because he will notice things going wrong as well. So, say we've got a committee, we've got officers that are actually held within law, we've got a cabinet member who knows his brief and has some knowledge of it. We won't always have that, potentially, but we do have a cabinet with a lot of knowledge. I don't see a reason why we don't proceed with the mandatory one. We are free at any time as a committee to make a recommendation to cabinet. They explore a second. But bear in mind in this, we haven't had a lay member before. I don't see why, you know, we're going to have more support and assistance than we've ever had before. And if after, in a year's time, 2 years' time, we decide we want a second one to with a property specialism, we can just make that simple recommendation at a time.
I'm minded just to put this to you members for a vote on, do we accept this proposal as is with one member, or do we reject it and ask for it to go back to consider two? But taking Councillor James's point, this is a starting point. It doesn't limit us as a council to, in the future. Councillor Tustine.
I think actually also looking at page 45, the last sentence says the committee should evaluate its impact and identify areas for improvement. So maybe if we did want to go down this mandatory path, that we actually put into the work plan review at a point in the near future. So at least ways obviously obviously the best will to try and recruit a couple of people at least, which I do think, and as it does state that, although it is a recommendation, but if we at least get the mandatory person in place, and then we could go for look at it again in 6 months or something. I don't know.
Councillor Cadecha.
This may be a stupid question, but I just wanted to ask you, with this appointment of an independent member, do we have any say as a committee of this person who's going to be appointed? Do we get the pre or final say, yes, we would like this person to work with us or not?
Well, the proposal is that this committee mandates the chairman and two members of the opposition as a three-person team to assist in the interviews and the appointments thereof. So it's very much a committee activity. Councillor Cubitt, you just put your...
I think Councillor Basham's point is very well made. The revenue that's generated by our Treasury portfolio is around 1.3 million. The revenue generated by the property portfolio is around 16 or thereabouts. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's a very significant difference. We historically have not had a huge success with Basing View, which is one of our principal areas. I mean, I don't know what the vacancy rates have been in the last 10 years, and I look forward to hearing from Martin what those vacancy rates are, because that site was supposed to have been developed in 2011, and most of it hasn't been delivered still. So, and I wanted to know from the chairman and the SIPFA codes specifically, his comments in relation to our fiduciary duty to our tax-paying residents, because we've now missed probably the greatest strength of the commercial real estate market with a failed partnership in Muse. And have we, as a committee, done what we're supposed to have done in terms of ensuring that we meet the fiduciary duties that we have as councillors individually to our taxpaying residents?
I think we're straying off the issue here. We're discussing the appointment of external advisor.
No, with great respect, we're not straying it, because Councillor Basham has said that he believes that it would be eminently sensible for there to be an independent co-opted onto the committee that has expertise in real estate, commercial real estate, because the revenue is 16 million versus 1.3. And my point is that maybe he's right, because we have not been very successful with the commercial real estate portfolio in the last 10 years.
Councillor James.
Yeah, Chairman, we are getting stuck into some very, very long grass. Obviously, it was the council's responsibility to cut it. We're not going anywhere. If we have to have a bullet point 6 to say, and that this the committee will review the success of that one additional member, we'll deal with it. I think we're getting as well carried away with where we are as an Audit and Accounts Committee. The Basing View project was designed mostly through cabinet decision. It was something done a long time ago. It didn't come to Audit and Accounts because it's a strategy, it's a policy, it's not, it's about Basing View as a particular strategy. It doesn't come here. We've then just got to look at the numbers and returns and the audits of what happens with that. So I think we're getting a bit carried away. We are just sitting in the council chamber. We are not full council. We are just the Audit and Accounts Committee, and we probably need to frame where we are appropriately. But if we could just get this item through, because I think we've just done enough on it.
I'll take one more point, then I will vote on whether we accept this as is. Councillor Basham.
I just wanted to say, with regards to Councillor Isaac, I wasn't in any way suggesting that we didn't have property professionals involved in the council. It was really a reflection of the fact that this committee's delegated duty by full council is to carry out the governance and risk oversight on full council's behalf. And I believe that this committee would be deficient in not, if it's going to invite a lay member on, if that lay member is looking in the £1.5 million corner, not the £16 million corner, for lack of a better analogy. I think, with regards to Councillor James' points about wanting to close this point off and let's just get on with it, I would encourage him to read the whole of page 43 of the SIPFA guidance, which sets out what the core functions of an audit committee are. Thank you.
So,
If I may just remind committee that the scrutiny obviously scrutinises how a particular project, etc., is performing. That's not the role of this committee. And this committee is looking at the governance, the risk around those projects, etc., which that assurance comes from our internal audits and as part of the external audit at the end of the year in terms of the financial accounts. So I think there might be a slight confusion in terms of scrutiny undertake that kind of full review and the performance of it. This committee's role isn't to challenge the activities that are undertaken by officers in terms of property investment.
I never said that, and I didn't mention the scrutiny committee. Sorry, was you talking to me, or?
no, it's the issue that some of the points have been made are not handled by this committee, they're handled by scrutiny. It can get quite confusing. But I want to take this particular item 8 of are we going to proceed with what is recommended here, that we have the subcommittee which will help to appoint one external person to this committee, as is this report. Who is in favour of this as it stands? Need two, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those opposed? 2. So this motion is carried. So that's item 8 is approved as is.
Something. I wasn't talking about scrutiny committee, but this is a scrutiny committee. And I wasn't talking about a project. I'm actually talking about the underlying value of the assets, okay? Now, the fact that it happens to be rolled into an area and can also be called a project doesn't negate the fact that the underlying assets are relevant to this committee. Thank you.
On to item 9, the internal audit progress report. Paul.
It's me.
Richard.
I'll take that, Chair. Thank you, Chair. So this is the progress report, my regular report on the work completed by the internal audit team covering September, October, and also the position of outstanding recommendations up to about mid-November. The audits we've completed are summarised in the table on paragraph 4.1 of my report on page 49. And the report shows the 3 reports: 1 we gave full assurance, 2 substantial assurance. No reasonable or limited this time around. And the summary reports to those are shown in appendices 2 to 4 attached to my report. Our report also covers the position with outstanding audit recommendations. Paragraphs 4.2 and 4.3 on page 49 summarise the position, and the detail is shown in Appendix 1 format I'm sure you're familiar with. Of no further updates. We've had responses from all heads of service on the current position of those recommendations, which is very pleasing. So there's got no more information from myself. And the final bit is the progress on paragraph 4.5.3 shows the work we're going through at the moment. And just to add, we've got 4 reports that are currently in draft, as opposed to 3, which I've reported in within the report. And just request that the committee note the report, please.
Questions? Councillor Tustin.
Thank you, Chair. First, it's actually a comment, and I wondered, in some of these things where we've got revised dates, those dates are included, but some of these targets where we had a date for completion, there's nothing further added to say when things could get completed. So can we make sure that all of them, if they've missed a target, have actually got a revised date? Another point actually is also the issue about these call-outs to dangerous structure incidents. I wondered how often those occurred. Is this something that, because it's obviously put down as a significant risk, and I suppose it's because obviously danger to people, but it'd be interesting to know how often those occur. And another one around on the project management side of it, where we talk about getting resource requirements for projects, but the question would be around how will this impact on the resources for day-to-day work, operational resources, because obviously quite often operational resources then get pulled across into projects, and then that can impact that stuff. So some kind of indicator around or clarity around that would be useful. Thank you.
Chair, if I could take, with regards to the number of call-outs, we'd have to get back to you on that. I'll go back to the building control team. It was them that, I think I mentioned at the last committee, the head of planning actually requested that we undertake that audit because of her concerns over the governance arrangements. So that report was agreed with full cooperation of the team. But yeah, happy to get back with those figures.
Revised dates.
With regards to, yes, sorry, thank you. Yeah, with regards to revised dates, where the manager head of service do suggest a revised date, we do put that in. So the ones which don't have any revised dates, I think of business continuity, for example, they haven't changed, but the update does give the progress, and we will update the completion date according to the information that we're given by the relevant head of service.
And the third bit was about resource planning. So where resources are identified for projects, that obviously means those resources may well be being pulled away from operational issues. So just wanted to know how that's dealt with.
So we wouldn't be able to answer that from an internal audit point of view. That would have to go back to the project management team.
Any other comments, or are we happy to note this report? Noted? Noted. Right, on to item 10, which is the fraud update, protecting the public purse. Have we got anyone to... Paul.
Thank you, Chair. This is a regular report to committee. I bring 2 a year to you, one this time of year and one in June. And all this does is just inform the committee of the work that my team have carried out in terms of protecting the public purse. The second report, as I mentioned, will come to you in June. I think the report speaks for itself, so I wasn't going to add anything further to that, but I do ask the committee to note the report. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, this has been going on for some years, so it's an extension of what's been going on previously. Are we happy to note the content of this report? Right, so, yeah, on to item number 11, which is the Q2 monitoring update report on the annual property plan. And welcome to the portfolio holder, Councillor Isaac.
Good evening, Chairman, and good evening, councillors and officers. As you say, this is the Q2 monitoring update on the property plan that was approved by full council in February of this year. As you can see from the report, despite the fact that we are experiencing very difficult economic circumstances globally, and in particular with the increase in interest rates and inflation, our property portfolio has performed well. It's operating in a very stable way, and I think that's to a large part due to the fact that a lot of the investments are held in the industrial properties, which have been least affected by some of the things going on in the economy. That cannot be said for the retail sector, and nor for that matter for the offices sector to the same extent. But we are 60% of our assets by capital value, I think, are in industrial property. And the other defensive aspect of our property portfolio is the fact that a lot of it is held on long leases, so we don't have, we're not directly letting to the occupational tenant, and it's the occupational tenants who are at the sort of front end, really, in terms of business. We collect a lot of our rents from long leaseholders. So that's encouraging, but obviously we always have to be very vigilant, and we need to continue to upgrade our property portfolio, modernise it, make it more diverse, and therefore more defensive. And we've done that. As part of that, recently we acquired a hotel, the Premier Inn in Basingstoke, which I think is going to prove to be a good investment. It's immediately yielding 5%, and there's a rent review in 2025, which is index linked with a cap and a collar to it. So I think this is positive at the moment. I think the other things that I'd like to highlight in the report are our ability to recruit staff, permanent staff. Since I've been responsible for the property portfolio in Basingstoke and Dean, it's always been incredibly difficult to recruit. Yeah, but maybe, and you may have hit the nail on the head there, actually, Councillor James. But let's hope that that's not the case, and that it is more of a general problem that councils, in competition with the private sector, find that it's quite difficult to recruit. But I'm pleased to say that we've got more permanent members of staff than I think we've had for many, many years, and I think that reflects well on the opportunities that people see of working for a well-run council that has a substantial property portfolio. So that's positive, I think. I'm also pleased that we've got a new member of the team who's going to focus on sustainable investment. Another area that where I'm delighted that progress is speeding up is in the use of the IT that we've invested in the property team, the TechForge system. And the report here leads me to believe that many more offices are now familiar with it and using it. And the next stage is to make sure that we have better IT connectivity with the finance department, because obviously the two are the key partners in making sure that we run an efficient financial system and property system. Other area that I'm very pleased that we've achieved is the letting of the surplus space at Parklands to Southern Health. We now, having moved out of that space, we're now generating £160,000 per annum. And it's very good to have another public body next door. So I think yes, just to conclude, the important work on our community buildings strategy is underway, and that will be brought forward to you in due course. And also pleased that in terms of decarbonisation and our responsibilities in terms of climate change, that the surveys on our operational properties have now been completed, and therefore we can start taking more measures to reduce the energy inefficiencies and so forth of our operational properties. And so that's, Chairman, concludes my opening remarks.
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. Sue, you wanted to
Yes,
comment?
just a couple of comments. So the update in the annual property plan is as per the annual property plan, as Councillor Isaac's noted, in the strategic asset management plan that was approved by council. So it lays out in that document what we will update the committee on throughout the year. And so this is an update in line with that particular outcome. And if I could ask members to just please note that the appendix is on pink papers, and therefore we can't discuss those items in a public meeting. We'd have to go into closed session if we need to follow any of those up. Thank you.
Yeah, just picking up on that point that Sue mentioned, when we get to it, if we want to go into closed session, we'll have to take as an agreement or otherwise, or just, it is for information, so it is not mandatory that we need to discuss that information. Councillor Cubitt, I think you've...
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things. We agreed at a previous audit meeting that we would continue to receive an appendix of the valuations of the 32.5 million that was taken from the Treasury and put into additional property. And that was agreed, and yet there is no attached form telling us what that valuation is on those properties, because they're not supposed to be fungible with the rest of the assets, and it was agreed at audit. I categorically can recall that it was agreed that we would continue to receive updates on the values of those investments.
Just two things in response to that. On page 94 of the pack, there is a table that looks at the asset valuations, and fifth line down gives the value of those overall assets. So I appreciate that's the overall value, not the individual 4 assets. And then in the strategic asset management plan that was approved by council, it was agreed that the previous property investment strategies under the old strategy would now form part of the normal investment portfolio, and that we would no longer separate those out.
No, I recall that that's what was being planned, but I also recall, and I'm almost 100% certain I'm correct, that we as a committee said, nonetheless, that we would like to see the evolution of those 32.5 million properties that were purchased through the sale of bonds in order to ensure that we, because it was ring fenced, and I hear what you're saying, that there was a strategy paper that was approved in February, but nonetheless I recall vividly that we as committee requested that those still be updated to us.
The only thing that I can definitely remember going back in time is we wanted to make sure that 30 million was reported upon, because we didn't want it subsumed into the general property fund. But I must admit, I cannot remember if we wanted a regular update on individual items. I think I'd have to go back and look at that.
So in February 2021, it was still given to us as a committee. I've just looked online on the previous report. So it was there in 2021.
So yes, previously the committee throughout the year prior to the new strategic asset management plan being approved did receive separately as part of the annual property plan update an update on those 4 properties. But because that is no longer the property investment strategy, we have a new property investment strategy, and this is updating you on the new property investment strategy. The other assets are now part of the overall, if you like, portfolio of the authority. And obviously they are listed here for your information in terms of the overall value, but we've not had that conversation again since the strategic asset management plan was approved, because obviously we're not monitoring those 4 separately, we monitor them as part of the overall portfolio.
Well, I have to say recollections vary. I vividly remember that we as a committee did insist on continuing to be told, and that whilst you were absorbing them into the legacy portfolio, that it would keep an eye on those assets. Secondly, in terms of the valuation increases, it's obviously good that the investment portfolio has increased, but is that because it was undervalued? And because as far as I'm aware, commercial real estate market hasn't increased in 2022 by that significant amount, from 292 to 336. So does that suggest that actually we were undervaluing our assets when compared with market value?
Yeah, shall I come in here? Yeah, the industrial market, as Councillor Isaac said, has sort of improved substantially during the course of the year. Yields have sort of moved in from 4.5% to sub 4 in some cases. Additionally, there were some lease rig years where there was no income being generated, and now there is income being generated. And those 2 factors alone have added substantial amounts to the property portfolio.
Brilliant. Do we have any delinquent accounts at the moment? And if so, what percentage of the portfolio is delinquent at the moment?
By delinquent, you mean sort of arrears or tenants gone into liquidation?
Arrears not.
Yeah, we have sort of 3 tenants where we'll be seeking sort of write-offs. One is Little Frankie's in the...
You don't have to tell us who they are. Yeah.
You're right, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Isaac.
Yeah, just add to that, Councillor Cubitt, that debtors is something that's regularly reported to us at property board level. So there's a constant monitoring of the performance on that aspect.
Excellent, thank you.
Councillor Basham. Sorry.
Does this link into item 6 on the agenda, summary of investment income and property age debt? Because I was a bit confused by that paper because it only summarises the investment income and there was no property age debt, and I was trying to find it in the rest of the papers and I couldn't. But does that help or does that hinder?
So I can only apologise to committee. It was meant to come off of the first item and go into the annual property plan. So it looks like it's come off one and not gone into the other. So we'll make sure that that is included in the future.
Councillor Cubitt.
So when I look at the previous reports, many down is defined, even in your February strategic plan, which has significantly changed the way we get reports going forward. Many down was mentioned as a non-treasury investment item. So I just wonder why, despite the fact in February we were calling it a non-treasury investment item, it doesn't appear to be on that table on page 94. Forgive me if I'm being stupid.
I assume you're talking about the alternative investment strategy, which was the additional £25 million invested in many down infrastructure funding.
Well, all I know is when I looked at it, many down was all over the tables in the non-treasury property investments with sums next door to it, and it's not in your table now. Well, it's in your February strategy, so I'm sure you'll be able to find it quite easily. Anyway, okay, so but nonetheless, do you not deem many down to be considered to be a non-treasury investment asset then?
So the many down development is not part of alternative investment strategy in itself, but the investment that we want to make as a council in terms of providing funding to help that development is an alternative investment strategy. It's not part of the property investment, it's part of the treasury management strategy.
Sorry, forgive me, I'm being very stupid. I didn't think this was an alternative investment strategy document we're discussing now. I thought we were talking about what you deem to be the property investment portfolio. I'm very confused.
Sorry, in the strategic asset management plan paper that went to council in February, in appendix 3, it talks about the annual property plan for 22-23, and it actually details what the plan is in terms of what the officer focus will be during the year. This is an update against that. So that actually details things like it will focus on monitoring tenant compliance, undertaking rent reviews, ensuring void unlet accommodation is relet as soon as possible, minimising void and irrecoverable expenditure. And in relation to the investment portfolio, it talks about the parameters that we will use in terms of actually assessing a property investment out of the new property investment strategy, but it also talks about the benchmarking that we will undertake. And under the operational property, it talks about generating surplus income from surplus accommodation, which Councillor Isaac has obviously already given you information on this evening. Talks about the community assets, and then talks about the stock condition surveys and work with community groups. So that is the focus of the annual property plan, and that is the update that is provided to you at this time. So this is not an update on Many Down, it's not an update on Basing View, it's an update on the items that were just detailed in terms of what the annual property plan was and what the focus on property activity would be this year.
So I hear you, Sue, but I'm looking at the document that you're referring to, and
it's on page 276.
I'm looking at the council holds investment property portfolio with a value of approximately 300 million, generates a revenue of 16.2 million, comprising 214 properties, 322 vacancies, portfolio significant revenue generator. And then it goes on to talk about regeneration and development opportunities, talks about Basing View and maximising the value of Basing View, and then it talks about regeneration, the annual property plan of 2022, and it talks about investment property management. So it talks about all of these things, and then it goes on, there's a regeneration section which talks about Basing View and various other things.
Councillor Cubitt, what is the purpose of your doing this?
So what I'm trying to understand is, if this meeting today is about our property portfolio, it's not, okay.
On that same report, if you go to Appendix 3, which starts on page 272, it tells you what the annual property plan is for 22-23. And obviously the report that comes to this committee gives an update on our achievement against that property plan. The Strategic Asset Management Plan, which is the entire document, looks at all of the way in which we will manage our property assets. That's not necessarily everything for the remit of this committee. This report deals with the annual property plan and the information that we said that we would update you on during the year.
Councillor Basham.
A question about the annual property plan, if I may. On page 94, we have a table which sets out the various estates and the property investment strategy acquisitions and so on. And we've got opening carry values on the left, closing carry values on the right, with adjustments in the middle, most of which are revaluations. We've got some very good positive revaluations there, 15% on Daneshill, 17 on Hound Mills, 16 or 28 on Viables, depending on how you measure it, etc. Why do we not have any write-downs on the malls and Festival Place? And I ask that question because paragraph 2.1 on page 93 says that we have a total return of 10.3%, and we've got some very positive industrial performance, and yet we have capital value declines of 33% on the malls and 6.4% on Festival Place. And total return, well, the total return on that other table is 15% from opening values to closing revalued values. So there's obviously some sort of mismatch in my understanding or the data there.
I'd just point out that the I see what you say and note that the big fall in values on the malls and Festival Place came in the previous year, 20. The fall in value came in the previous year during COVID.
It's not what it says at 2.1 though, is it?
Yeah.
Is that a mistake then?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
So, sorry, just to clarify here, the valuations here are the same as in our unaudited draft statement of accounts that are, obviously, as we discussed, have been audited by EY at the moment. These come from our external valuers, and we did challenge this at the time about the valuation of the malls, and that, and it was confirmed there are ups and downs in there, but the malls is treated as one asset on our books, but there were some ups and downs in there, so there will be some valuation movements either way. But as Martin said, there was a large decrease last year, which has taken account of some of that anyway, which is already reflected in that.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, but it's management's decision to settle on property values and then the auditor's decision to challenge those, correct, or to test those?
So we rely on our external valuers to
You seek valuers to help you, but it's ultimately management's decision to settle on values under the accounting standard, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the auditors audit those values that management has settled on. Great. And all we're looking at here is just an error in paragraph 2.1, and you've decided not to revalue the malls downwards in 2022. That's fine if that's my understanding.
We have taken the value that has been given to us by our external valuers, and there are no, and there are upwards and downwards within the whole thing. I must be missing the point here, Councillor.
It's a very subtle one. It's just that management make the decision about the values they carry in the accounts, whereas advisors are paid to advise and make a recommendation of what you put them in the accounts at. That was all. Sorry, this is a really good example of why we might benefit from having a property skilled layperson on this committee, because there's seriously some gaps in understanding, aren't there?
If we may clarify, we are required by our external auditors to be able to evidence the valuations that we include in our accounts. We use an external valuer to do that for us. Whilst we will always have a look at things that we think might be odd, we then look at the explanations they give to us, and we either challenge them and ask them to revalue based on our challenge, or we accept the valuations that they give us. So EY will whilst you might be right in terms of saying technically it's the management that have put those valuations in, they expect to value and monitor against the independent valuations that we've received.
Yeah, that's fine. I didn't have a problem with it at all. It was just a question about why we hadn't devalued the malls, and it appears that there was just an error in the paper with regards to the reference of when the malls fell in 33%. It's a mountain out of a molehill. Don't worry.
Yeah, I can see your point now. I understand. Yeah. Okay.
Councillor Cubitt.
Sorry, I'm sorry I'm being really stupid, but I still don't understand why Manydown's not included in this.
Councillor James.
Yeah, I think we own all this property. It's our wardrobe, it's our entire clothing range that we own and possess. The annual property plan is just dealing with the laundry basket. It's just whatever we decide to put in the laundry basket and deal with over the year. So all you're going to see in here is what, I don't say laundering because I've got too many finance people who have a heart attack if we mention laundering, but we're just dealing with the laundry basket. This is the basket of properties that we are reviewing, managing this year. Because obviously most of them, a lot of them, what next year's basket will look different because a lot of things happen. I mean, if you go along Basing View recently, you'll see that the whole southern bit is being totally, apart from the car park where the skidiots go, the rest of it's all been looking very nice. A lot of, it's all happening. Grosvenor House going, well, it's being whatever. That street will be all new, right up until where the glass house used to be, very soon. So that's all happening. So, and a lot of those are mentioned as places that are things are happening. Once it's happened for the next 25 years, frankly, they're quite boring, which is why we have this £1 million has a, you know, a 1 million income has an expert in the room, whereas the other bit doesn't, is because a lot of the property stuff is quite settled. Once it's happened, it's gone. It's 10 to 20 ways. So Manydown's not here because Manydown's actually a totally different thing that's sitting somewhere else, that we're going to draw down the land and it's going to be all very happening. But it wouldn't be in this because it's not something that's reviewed. We have a Manydown strategy very separate to this, which is speeding along at an amazing pace. Already just got that far in 0.3 of a millennium, so I think we'd be proud of that. So this is different, this is happening this year, boom, that's my understanding. So you're just looking at a laundry basket, you're not going to see all the shoes in the laundry basket unless you do it badly. That's my explanation, hope it helps.
Thank you, Councillor James, it was beautifully put, thank you. Are we happy to note this report as it is in front of us? Yes. Noted, splendid. Okay, that takes us then on to, I think, item 12, which is the work programme. Is the 30th of January is the next meeting, 2 months' time. Any comments on that, Ellie? No. So that's, and the statement of accounts is there, which is carried over from this month. Okay. So items 13, I don't think there's any exclusion of present. Item 14, there's no confidential items, etc. So I declare the meeting closed. Thank you all.
Thank you.